Hello and welcome to Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show Podcast Network. We are the Geek Show podcast that covers movies either starring, by or about pop stars. No other podcast covers such a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a filmmaker, I'm a film critic for the Geek Show, and I also write for Horrified, the British horror website. This week I've been joined by...
Hello, I'm Sarah Hayton. I'm a writer and sometime director, and I also write reviews for the Geek Show Podcast Network website, and that's probably it.
That's probably it. You're working hard on the writing and directing stuff. You don't have to feel, guilt over not having 3 jobs. That's fine.
Although a job did come in today and somebody wants me to act in something, I'm just like, oh my goodness, I have not done that for a while.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. Exciting.
Yes.
This week, listeners, we'd like to take you back to a time that now feels very, very distant. A time when the phrase, "let's go and see that new Madonna movie," was something you might say to a friend rather than a bitter enemy who you wanted to suffer. But there was once a time when this was true. It was just off the back of her second album, Like a Virgin, featuring the song Like a Virgin. And it is Desperately Seeking Susan, the second feature film by Susan Seidelman. It was a massive hit, the 5th biggest film at the American box office in 1985. And still, I would say pretty well loved today, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I noticed it's got sort of 4.5 stars in the place that came up on, where did we watch it? Prime, I think we watched it. And you can understand why. It's like a nicely structured, interesting, still relevant film, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, Madge is in it, not being too Madgy. She was sort of it was really great to revisit it, because I remember at the time I really liked it. And I still do.
So when you say at the time, when will you have seen this first
Probably
time?
back in the 80s.
Right. Okay.
So that would have been sort of when I was at college, and it was 85. Yeah, sort of sixth form and college time, I would guess. I can't remember seeing it, but I know that we've had sleepovers and watched this with my chums at sixth form, when we weren't watching Grease.
Yes, of course.
On some VHS classic.
So that presumably that will not have been when it came out, right? That'll have been a fair bit later than that.
It was a bit later, yeah, because obviously it was out in 85, so it was just a small amount of time later than that, but I'm not going into further detail.
What I'm thinking is that this is remarkably the first time I've watched this, and from my perspective, it is so intensely early Madonna. It bottles the appeal she had around the very early years of her career so precisely that I am fascinated to hear what this would look like against a backdrop of, say, Like a Prayer or True Blue or some other late 80s, early 90s stage.
Yeah, and so it sort of stands up really well amongst that sort of bracket. I think later when she went full sort of sex bomb, that was obviously a different phase that she was going through. I think she was going through this. The great thing about it is that it's just, everybody said at the time as well, oh, she's playing herself. And in subsequent years, they've sort of said the same thing, because with Madonna, she can't play anything other than that. She's very much Madonna in everything she does, and this part is perfect for her. It's just, at that stage, she was still like a New York-based singer, dancer turned singer.
Yeah.
And she has that sort of just just adventure. She was adventure, and she arrived in New York, and she, Susan, at one point, Susan looks out. Was it Susan? No, it wasn't Susan. It's, what's her name?
Roberta, the Rosanna Arquette character.
Looks out. Yeah, she looks out the window, and she's sort of gazing wistfully out the window, and somewhere in the background there's the Brooklyn Bridge. And then the next shot is this big bus arriving, and who should step off the bus but Madonna? And it's like adventure coming from afar to join Roberta in the city. And it's perfect. There was this great line, actually. Susan comes back to see her friend who works in, I think it's a magic club, and she's a cigarette girl.
Yeah.
And the cigarette girl says, "Susan, we all thought you were dead." And she says, "No, I was just in New Jersey."
Yes, that is great. Yeah.
She's a cracking line.
We'll talk about that magic club a bit later, because there is a surprising amount to unpack there. But
yes. Yeah. What a surprise that was. Yeah. But there was, it's not the only surprise.
But the thing that I was thinking of when I was thinking of like Madonna's early appeal is, I'm not in the target market for Madonna fashion tips, it would be fair to say, but correct me if I'm wrong, the idea of very early holiday era Madonna is it's glamorous, but it's also homemade. It's saying, look, here is a major international sex symbol, and she's wearing stuff that you can well believe she found at like a thrift store.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's what happens in part of the film. She goes into a secondhand clothing store. She tries to negotiate her jacket for the boots. She, at the one point, she's sort of walking off subtly with the boots and trying to steal them, because she's like a rebel, and she makes her own rules, and with perfect lipstick the whole time. And there was this idea that she could just sort of, she's putting it together when she's in the toilets, she's lots of pulling some random thing out of her bag and just going, "Oh yeah, I'll put that on." And that was kind of very much her look. It looked like she wasn't afraid to wear her underwear on the outside, and that makes her sound like Superman, but no. She was cross-dressing as well, if you think about it, because she was wearing the shorts and the shirt of her lover, and she just went out in that. But yeah, so she actually, you feel like she's just sort of fallen out of bed, and she's got a vest on, and she's got these sort of fishnet stockings with the garter belt on top, suspender belt on top, and she puts on the guy's shirt, and that's his shirt and shorts that she's wearing, and she puts the shirt on, and that's how she distinguishes between lying around in bed clothes and going out clothes. So that's what she wears. And the fact was, nobody dressed like that at the time. I mean, I wasn't living in New York, I was living in Northeast England, so certainly nobody where I lived was wearing anything remotely like that until Madonna was everywhere, and then everybody was wearing the fishnet gloves and the crucifixes and all the so there was this idea of she would invent herself as she went along, and that was an inspiring idea. I think prior to that, in pop, I don't know, that was sort of the realm of
constructed kind of glamour, right? It's about an unattainable kind of glamour.
And I think you have to have quite a forceful personality to push that through, because I mean, other pop stars at the time, I guess Debbie Gibson,
Hello.
Not.
I'd love to hear you, Debbie McGee, sing Rapture. I think it would be great.
It would be awesome. Yeah, Blondie, obviously, she's quite a strong personality as well, and they would put together their own looks, and that was very much like a New York feel. That's what came out of the city, and in London, I suppose, and possibly Birmingham, we had a thing happening in the 80s as well, but it was mainly focused on the male side of things. There's not a massive amount going on the female side of things. You get people who are very similar looking to Madonna sort of appearing. But certainly she was the standout person, and was such an inspiration. it was her attitude as well in the film.
Yeah.
The fact that you get the impression that she just kept everything she owned in that case, and it was a cool case, and she had a cool jacket, and
Yeah.
she sort of looked at these like knockoff, not Nefertiti, actual Nefertiti earrings, and she'd be just like, yeah, I'll stick one in one ear, and then I don't know, the other one in my pocket.
And that's the thing that gets the plot going, isn't it? Because the man
Yeah.
who she's lifting the clothes and jewelry of is a guy called
In the
Mika.
mob.
Yeah, presumably he's named that's a hint. He's named after Ralph Meeker, the 1940s and 50s cinema bad guy.
Oh, really? Oh, nice
Yeah.
one. So it's not Mika, the singer of Grace Kelly.
Not that one, no.
Who's
He's
named
also
after-
played in another pop star cameo, and I love it when we start watching a film for a particular pop star. Even we get a load of other pop star cameos in it. But that's Richard Hell, the legendary proto-punk NY scenester.
Was he her original boyfriend? No.
Ooh, no, he's the guy in the bed at the start. He's the mobster at the start.
Who is he?
Yeah.
I didn't even see his face.
Well, yeah, it's not
He was
very.
so anonymous. He was
Yeah.
delightfully anonymous. The way that normally women are discarded in that fashion, and that's a complete reversal of the norm, where you hardly get to see their face. You certainly don't know what their name is, apart from, in passing, sort of, half an hour later or something. So I didn't realize that was him.
No, I think he's only there because he was in Susan Seidelman's first film, Smithereens, in a more substantial role.
Now then, was Smithereens re-released a couple of years ago?
It was, yeah. It was on Criterion a couple of years ago. And
it's not the punk scene in New York, is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Remember? Yes.
We did it on Eclectica one week, didn't we?
We did, yes. Yeah. Indeed.
That's really interesting to think back to that film now that I've actually seen Desperately Seeking Susan, because the main character of Smithereens is almost like a critique of the later film before it happened. It's like saying, all right, here's what someone like Susan would be like in real life. He's someone living a very precarious existence who's always in very serious trouble. And now she does it again with the second film being a more kind of light comic register.
Yeah, and we never really find out what she does. I mean, she's sort of affiliated with a band, and she's friends with somebody in a magic club. But what does she actually do? Is she just a drifter? Is she a grifter? She's certainly quite happy to be, commit a crime if she needs to, if she feels like she has to, because obviously she has zero cash. She has no home. She's, poor and homeless.
We don't even find out her surname. There's a bit towards the end of the film where we see her and Roberta named in a newspaper article, and Roberta has a full name written out, and then it's just and Susan.
Yeah, well spotted.
But I think that is part of why this role works for Madonna in ways that her later roles didn't, because even in her singing career, Madonna's main suit is not likability. And, I don't mean that in a harsh way. I think you can actually have a really good pop career and not be particularly likable. Her suit was always attitude, rather than likability.
Yeah, if you want likable, go to Dorothy Gibson. What the hell? Debbie Gibson. It was Dorothy Gibson. What's going on with her brain?
I think she was in Blondie around the same time as Debbie McGee.
This is a girl group forming before our eyes.
But yeah, it's true. So, that's not a hindrance to her in pop, but it was a hindrance to her when she started playing lead roles in films, and you have to do something to get the audience on side. Whereas with Susan, I mean, she is likable, she is charismatic, she is interesting, but the main character is Roberta, and almost everything at least, that we see of Susan is something we're seeing through Roberta's eyes. And so it allows Madonna to play an object of fascination at the time when she was becoming an object of fascination for the entire Western world.
definitely. There's always this idea that whatever your idea of Madonna is, it's correct. She's kind of malleable in that way because she reinvented herself constantly, and
Yeah.
you were always sort of left thinking, who is the real Madonna? Which is kind of a more mainstream structuring device. I don't know whether anybody, I mean, who sort of stays the same person all the time, but she just sort of was able to monetize that.
Yeah, I think
Use
one
it as a
thing
marketing
it's sort of
idea.
passed away from pop music discourse now, but this idea that if you change genre a lot, there should be a real you that is underpinning everything else and that we can see, I remember that it's just the ink that was spilled trying to work out if Beck meant it or not in the 90s was really weird to me. It's like, what why do you want Devil's Haircut to be a tender confessional from the bottom of a man's soul? How would that improve the song?
I don't know. I remember getting that album and just thinking, this is excellent. I have not heard anything like this before in my life.
Absolutely. Yeah, I adore Beck, but that another topic for another pop screen, maybe.
Sure.
Madonna's reinvention was always very theatrical, and I don't think, again, she got a lot of that who is the real Madonna, and as you say, I think it's bizarrely beside the point. I think when you maybe there is an element to early Madonna where that's the real Madonna, where the headstrong woman who hustled her way into pop stardom, that is actually who she is. But by the time you get up to something like Erotica, I don't think it's the point of the music at all.
No, I think they're sort of quite disparate at that point. And it's almost like kind of a cynical 90s vibe about it, and which fits in with the period completely. But here we're back in the 80s, and there's lots of 80s symbols that, crop up in this film authentically that would be sort of rammed into a vintage, oh no, not a vintage, a sort of a period film set in the 80s, like the Flock of Seagulls haircut.
Yes,
which is obviously always going to be the bit up here and the bit down here, and everybody at that club who seemed to have been imported in from Camden, but also this was New York at the period, so I guess that exactly that person would be like a blend of, there was some punky characters, there were also some new romantic characters, and there was some obviously transvestite characters, I would say, not transgender but transvestite, before transgender was more of a thing.
And I think that bleeds through to the film's soundtrack as well, because one thing that really bothers me in films that are set in a previous time period is that everyone, no matter who they are or what type of character they are, is always listening to that week's top 10. Whereas you've got this kind of blended 80s in Desperately Seeking Susan. Yes, there is some 80s music. There's some Madonna music, of course, but people are also still listening to Iggy Pop and the Marvelettes and Aretha Franklin as well.
And Aretha Franklin, what was it at the beginning?
Is it Think?
Betty Everett.
Oh,
no,
sorry,
it was Respect, R-E-S-P-E-C-T.
It was Respect, you're right,
but the Betty Everett was more, wasn't it more associated with like how things used to be, and then it sort of gradually gets more modern and more empowered music as it goes along with Lust for Life, and people who are striking much more personality driven singers, I would say. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, that is true. If you make a film that's set in the 80s, you've got to have the pastel colors, and somebody has to be sort of fake Madonna, and there'll be somebody, like I'm thinking of The Wedding Singer, which is Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore.
Yeah.
And I love that film, even though it's Adam Sandler. And it's not, uncut gems. It's still good. And loads of people are in it, like John Lovitz is in it, and Steve Buscemi's in it randomly.
Oh, mate.
But
well,
Yeah.
if you've steered us onto the topic of unexpected celebrity appearances.
Well, funny, I should mention that. Yeah. Head on
Because
up.
the MC at that magic club we mentioned is John Bloody Turturro.
John Turturro, literally the very man.
The
Yeah.
Jesus.
Shocking. The Jesus. Yes.
Yeah, amazing. There's a few ones like that. I think I've assigned
He
him the
was only on for like a few seconds at a time, really.
Yeah.
But even in that, he has this nuanced, layered performance.
You can see why Spike Lee would see this or some other bit part he'd done and think, yeah, that's the guy I want for Do the Right Thing.
Yeah, cool.
But there's another one. There's earlier on, I think there's a scene where I think Roberta is at
a party.
No, it's not the party one. It's the street vendor. The street vendor where Roberta wrecks his stall.
With the hat and the glasses.
Giancarlo Esposito.
Is it?
Yeah.
Right. Because in that's where's that sequence? Oh, I think the sequence I was thinking of was it's a party and it's Roberta and she's so bland and everybody the shot opens on this horrible nighty like dress and it's just basically it's a wrap over dress but it's like a sleeping bag or something and everybody's in pastel and this is obviously the latest thing in sort of the higher the richer belt of New York and everybody's wearing these awful things and it's like an old folks home kind of outfits that everybody's wearing but this is a bland party and I think it's based I don't know what it's Roberta's birthday isn't it?
It is.
Or is it Gary's birthday? And she's, what was I going to say?
Star cameos.
Oh, yeah, star cameo. But also Gary makes it about him, Kel Surprise, by saying, "Oh yes, I've got this advert on the telly," and he sort of goes into the telly. But the guy he's talking to is none other than comedian Stephen Wright, he of the one-liners. So I used to love him. He used to, be regularly a guest star on like chat shows in the 80s. So he would sometimes be on Wogan or sometimes he'd maybe feature on Kelly Monteith or something. And yeah, that was a surprise. And he's very much every inch that persona in the film. So it's just like, oh my God, that's him. I mean, even the guy who, and I don't even know this guy's name, but the guy who is the henchman of the mob boss, he plays that role in so many things. He always is like edgy, psychopath, crazy blonde guy.
Yeah, who is that guy?
I don't know who that is.
I don't think it is Will Patton. No, I can't remember who it is.
And another celebrity cameo, live and direct pre-Roseanne, Laurie Metcalf.
Oh, of course.
Pre-Ladybird, way before Ladybird.
Yes.
And playing that excellent character. She does, eking out all the comedy out of her character because that's who she is. She's a great actor.
Absolutely, yeah. There's one other small appearance that I want to talk about just because it's the most 80s New York thing I can think of. But there's a scene where Roberta has gone back to Susan's apartment and there's like this saxophonist in the flat opposite.
Yes, that I would laughed out loud at that bit. Do you know who that is, mind?
That's John Lurie, the jazz musician and Jim Jarmusch regular. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. What it immediately reminded me of, and I was just barely laughing out loud. I thought it was the SNL sketch Sergio come to life, which is it's so hilarious, that sketch. I love it. I had to show Kirsten afterwards, and it was the idea is the chap's walking down the street and he accidentally snaps a sacred artifact that a beggar man is using, and he puts a curse on him, and he's just like, oh, that's weird. I'm getting on with my life as a busy businessman in the 80s. And then suddenly things would go wrong and Sergio would appear, and Sergio is John Hamm dressed up in kind of like a wife beater vest and playing an extreme raw 80s saxophone, just leaping out of walls and appearing. So yes, that's what that totally reminded me of. But niche.
It's one of those things that New York in the 80s just had, isn't it? That every
Absolutely,
bad
on a
apartment
stairway
block was just issued with its own saxophonist.
Yeah, on the fire escape, probably. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, or behind a blind somewhere, a backlit blind.
It's a good New York film. I normally have this problem with New York films where I feel like any culture about Los Angeles is always about how terrible Los Angeles is, which perversely makes me like LA quite a lot. Whereas every bit of culture about New York is about how great New York is, and the more people insist on it, the less I am convinced by that. Like I got through about 2 episodes of that pretend it's a city thing on Netflix before thinking, oh God, just shut up about New York just for a second.
I guess that makes kind of sense in the context of New York as a city. It's the destination for people fleeing lots of bad things, so they had to kind of pretty much engage with the East Coast city in like almost like a savior-like feel of freedom from tyranny or wherever the poverty, wherever they'd come from. Whereas LA's never had that. Obviously, opposite coast, people sort of amble over there sometimes.
LA, the best summary of LA in popular culture is Robert Downey Jr.'s line in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, where he says that LA is what happens if you just tipped America up at the East Coast and shook it, and all the normal people managed to hold on and all the freaks just fell to the end.
Yeah, it's an unusual place. It doesn't have that hard edge that New York has. New York always has this edge of having to be tough and carapaced against danger. But again, if you are in a new place, 8 million people, however many of them are immigrants,
however many of them are saxophonists.
So many saxophonists, and you've got to sort of put walls up against that saxophone hell.
So Roberta ends up in Susan's apartment because of a plot element that I think is maybe the divisive thing about this, because she's been following Susan around for a while. She's been watching her. She found out about her through, and if this doesn't date the film, nothing does, not even the flock of seagulls thing. She was fascinated by a personal ad that Susan had put in the local paper. And she goes to find who this extraordinary Susan, who's leaving so many ads, might be. And she ends up banging her head and being mistaken for Susan, including by some very shady characters. And because, of course, this is a movie, one bang of the head causes immediate amnesia. So she does come to believe she's Susan. Yeah. It struck me as having, it reminded me a bit of the funnier moments in Mulholland Drive, where you're watching someone try and work out who they are and how ridiculous that is. I mean, there's a line where, let me just see if I can find the line. Yeah. Where someone asks Roberta, what, did you rob a bank? And she goes, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. There is some great lines in it. Who wrote it? Leora Barish wrote it.
Oh man, I didn't know who that was, so I looked up her credits and...
Tell me.
Well, I mean, you're used to thinking of screenwriters, people who maybe don't have full control over what they do, so their CVs do sometimes end up looking a bit crazy. But Leora Barish is the only person in the world who can claim to have both worked for Chantal Akerman and written the sequel to Basic Instinct.
Really?
That's a high-low combo, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. What's that called? Mediocre Instinct?
The Ackerman film was Golden 80s, which I think was one of the slightly more mainstream things that Ackerman was doing around that time, like Couch in New York. But yeah,
Oh,
Basic Instinct 2, Risk Addiction, what a bizarre film that is.
oh dear.
I did watch it once on a bad
Did I?
movie evening with friends, and it's,
Oh,
you know how every time a character in a film is introduced as a novelist, you know that the prose that they actually come out with is going to be the worst shit that you've ever heard in your life.
yeah, yeah.
Basic Instinct 2 is like the gold standard of that.
Oh
Like
my God.
every single one of Sharon Stone's novels would have E.L. James sat there thinking, oh God, tone it down a bit.
In here, there are some choice lines. Like
Yeah.
I like that one. Where's that other one? Oh, you know when Gary and Madonna are getting stoned in his house, in his
Yeah.
fancy 80s house, and he's just like, oh, you know how at times like all time comes from a single point in the universe,
Yes.
and Madge is like, nah. It's just this lovely moment. It's just like, no, I'm not going to get sucked into whatever that nonsense is. Like, I'm Madonna. No, I'm going my own way.
And that is what Susan is to this film. She is an old-fashioned trickster figure who punctures the pretensions of everyone around her.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, there are some people who are kind of bothered by the amnesia thing and they think it's hokey. To me, it is no more relevant to the whole thing than A Midsummer Night's Dream is about love potion. It's just this slightly magic realist device to get everyone's lives in a mess so that that can be overturned once we've had our fun.
Sure, definitely. I love little concepts like that, conceits like that. And I don't think there's a problem with that. I think it's cute.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, not every film is going to do that, and I think there's still room for it.
Yeah, I think if the film was
not...
operating in a strictly realist register, I'd be bothered by it. But I found it actually was quite hard to confuse with an episode of Homicide: Life on the Streets. You know, I thought it was actually doing something a bit different to that.
Yeah. And it's not, of course it's not that, and it's still got, it's not the only old-fashioned element. There's a couple of really nice transition shots that are straight from, I don't know, I feel like it's 1940s or something. So she sort of is shaking her feet at the moment, I think, to dry nail varnish, and that moves on, transitions into a drum roll where a guy's playing the drums in the Magic Club, and then another one, a spinning newspaper.
Yeah.
Excellent, which transitions into, well, a drum roll again. I mean, admittedly they are drum roll focused, but still really enjoyable to sort of go, oh, that's cute.
Well, they use that band in the Magic Club as an actual organic part of the score, and there is a moment quite late on where there's a chase in the Magic Club, and the band actually start playing a faster version of their normal song, which I think is brilliant.
That's nice. That's like whenever in a film there's something bad that happens, like somebody screaming, or there's a gunshot, or there's something, you know, people are upset. Immediately they're just like, strike out the band, make the band play, make everybody feel better, and forget, you know, that there's just been a homicide on the dance floor.
I think I worked out what sort of film this is as soon as Susan picks up those earrings and Seidelman puts a little, like, optically inserted pre-CGI sparkle on them that looks fake as hell, but that's not the point. It's a little bit of magic, a little cartoonish element in what starts off as quite a realistic portrait of 80s New York. And I think that keyed me in straight away to how to enjoy this film.
I mean, looking at it from sort of looking back on it from now, as your first time watching it, how did it sort of, what's the feeling that it left you with overall?
I think it has a kind of giddiness that is really infectious, and it's strange because, I mean, it's best positioned as a comedy and it does have some terrific lines, but I didn't find it primarily funny so much as I found it primarily fun. You know, I was enjoying watching all these characters get into adventures, and it didn't actually bother me if it didn't end up in a sort of comedy set piece or a comedy line. I was just swept along by the adventure of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's light, frothy stuff. There's no sort of deeper meaningfuls, unless you choose to look too closely at the background and, you know, carry on.
You're saying that it would be a bad idea to look deeper into it, but have you heard Seidelman say what the inspiration for this film was?
No.
Only Celine and Julie Go Boating by Jacques Rivette.
Good God. Good Lord. Wow. Well, fair enough. I've not seen that, but I'm guessing that's a French auteur movie, is it?
Yeah, Rivette was one of the French New Wave, and he was noted for making movies that just went on forever, but in a good way mostly.
Well, maybe she just sort of was inspired by a part of that, and
Well, no, I've seen
left
Celine
most-
Julie. I love Celine Julie, by the way, and I actually think I can see the influence on this because Celine Julie Go Boating was made in collaboration with its lead actresses, Juliet Berto and I think it's Delphine Seyrig in the other role. And they were encouraged to try and spin a sort of fantasy to play these characters who were pushed together. They ended up in each other's worlds I only note this, in a magic club where one of them works. And they sort of cross between different worlds and different genres as a result. They end up in a kind of a period piece at one point that's like a spoof Henry James thing. And obviously, Desperately Seeking Susan is less like deliberately unrealistic than that. But there's a similar idea to it that Rosanna Arquette starts off in a drama about yuppies and Madonna starts off in, well, she basically starts off in Susan Seidelman's previous film, Smithereens. But through getting these earrings, which are very similar to the magic sweets in Celine and Julie, they are allowed access to different genres and different styles and different kinds of movie in a way.
That's the transformation. That would be, I guess, like the French Nouvelle Vague version of Mr. Ben.
Yes, absolutely. I'd never realised the inheritance that Celine and Julie Go Boating has from Mr. Ben, but I think it's absolutely there.
Miss Ben. Speaking of candy, one of the most unusual lines is when the weird sort of freaky blonde guy, henchman guy, says, do you like candy? Because I've got some in my pocket. Like, who are you talking to? A 7-year-old? It's not like, what, you didn't bring any puppies with you? This is a fully grown married woman.
Yes.
He's like very out of touch with what women want, I think. It's not bookmarks and trumpets all the time.
It does sound like he's workshopping lyrics for Dear Jessie, doesn't it, when he does that?
Yeah. But I did really like all the authentic colours, and it's not just pastels of the sort of middle class world, but the neons of the city and the harsh lighting. But I loved this drenched scene of the red light, or drenched in green. I thought that was fabulous. I love that anyway. I'm a big fan, so I get saturation.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a gorgeous looking film. It is shot.
It is.
Ed Lachman, who we have dealt with on Pop Screen before. He was the cinematographer for True Stories, the David Byrne movie.
Right.
But what a career! What a career he's had, though. He started off as Herzog's regular cameraman in the 70s. God. And he somehow lived through that. So he ended up
for a month, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. I can't remember whether I mentioned this in the True Stories podcast, but there's this amazing Herzog shot called Soufrier, where he goes to a volcanic island just as it's about to erupt. And he says something like, "We had to go down the mountain as Ed was feeling nauseous from the fumes." And you can just hear the contempt in Herzog's voice at this lightweight who passes out at a bit of volcanic gas.
Honestly, I live for these times when you do a Herzog impression.
Yes. You know what he did recently, though, Ed Lackman, another major film that he shot within the last decade?
Oh, Neon Demon?
Not the Neon Demon. He shot
No.
Carol.
Did he?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that has its own interesting palette, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to age him. I guess he'd be in his 60s, 70s by now, maybe.
It's a good point. Yeah. How old is Ed Lackman? Let me see. He was. Oh wow. Yeah, he's a real veteran. He's 73.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. But yeah, what a CV.
Yeah,
we should mention Rosanna Arquette because I feel like I know she was kind of disappointed that the film was marketed as a Madonna vehicle, and I think with some reason, because she is the lead of the movie.
That is true, but if you notice, she doesn't have as strong a contract as Madonna, because who gets their boobs out?
Yes, very true. Yeah.
Boobs. I'd totally forgotten the boobs.
You say that, but would Madonna necessarily have a no nudity clause in her contract? Like,
I think she would at that stage. Yeah,
maybe
it didn't really start happening until later. And and she sang about being a virgin, but she didn't really do much. She did bits and bobs of underwear, like wearing the basques and everything, but that was as far as it went at the time.
Yeah, fair point.
So yeah. So maybe she did have a stronger lawyer, or she is a stronger personality, I feel, than Arquette, I would guess.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, this must be pretty early in Rosanna Arquette's career because she was still getting a lot of ingenue roles at the time. And I suppose probably part of why this appealed to her was because she's playing a housewife, which is and a housewife who is the lead of the story as well, rather than just playing a hero's girlfriend. It is both more mature and a bigger part.
It is. She has some growing to do and maturing, and it is kind of a nice woman-centric movie. But the surrounding characters are the males who sort of put the women into various scrapes, like the magician, even the magician, you have to wear this wig and you have to wear this costume, and it's the same with Rosanna Arquette's character. You have to, in order to be this person, you have to wear these awful pastel frocks, and that's her freedom when she gets to wear this incredibly cool jacket with a triangle, a pyramid on the back that Madonna wears. It's her transition.
Yeah, I mean, one of the few false notes for me in the movie is that they are very angry at Roberta when she messes up the magic act, and I sort of thought I'd go and see that magic act. That actually looks better and more entertaining than doing it right.
Yeah,
it's the Tommy Cooper factor.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you do. And I think later on that kind of idea got more developed in some magic acts where the magic just goes wrong. And in fact, right now, and I can't remember where it is it Netflix has something on that is that exact trope,
right?
And it's the goes wrong group of people, the play that went wrong, the play that goes wrong, and only this time it's focused in magic, I believe. I can't remember exactly where it is. It could be Prime. I'm not sure. Another thing to say is this film, talking about music, is 3 years after the song by, Toto. And it was alleged to have been about Rosanna Arquette.
Really?
Yeah, Rosanna.
Wow. That's extraordinary. The main person I associate with being romantically fixated on Rosanna Arquette is James Spader in David Cronenberg's Crash. So I'm pleased to have that more wholesome version in my head. Yeah, I think she's very good here. I think there probably isn't really a false note in the cast, is there? I think it's a
No, I
very
don't
strong
think so.
cast.
Even like, Gary is a great little character with his hot tub empire, and that sort of reminded me of the hot tub empire run by Rye. What's Rye's name in
Ray Winston.
No, right, no, that was supposed to be Australian. I did not.
Oh, right, okay.
What was he called? And it was in Strictly Ballroom.
Ballroom. Right.
And he's drunk and he runs a Sparama, Rice Sparama. And that's what it reminded me of, like adverts from that as well. I like it when you get these sort of local adverts in American movies.
Yeah.
It's quite a thing. It crops up, fairly regularly, isn't it?
It's one of those things, isn't it, where it doesn't happen in this country, but you are so totally familiar with it as a phenomenon from American media, from watching the Mr. Plow episode of The Simpsons or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Made in America with Ted Danson has one in as well, where he's a car salesman doing his usual shtick.
But yeah, I think Rosanna Arquette is good, but I feel like we will have to talk quite a bit about Madonna, where she was at here and why. Would it be fair to say it never really hit as well for her acting-wise again after this, or am I overlooking something?
No, I know that she wanted plaudits for Evita, and people were a bit like, well, I don't know whether she's really hit many notes with Evita. And when you see videos like you mentioned it before, actually, Little Like a Prayer, when she's ostensibly playing a role in that of a woman, and then she's telling people like, Jesus, I let him out. And you're just like, yeah, you haven't changed, even though this is not a speaking role for you, it's a video. And it's just like, yeah, no, just, it's great when you're playing yourself, but beyond that, maybe don't.
I am indebted in my research here to Todd in the Shadows, a major inspiration for pop screen in general, but his video series Cine Madonna, where he watched every single Madonna movie.
Wow.
I mean, someone's got to. But it's it's the only chance you'll get to see some of the real obscurities. And I think what I noticed is that she's never vulnerable on screen. Like even in something like Blue in the Face, where she has a one-scene cameo as a singing telegram, she is really hard-faced and standoffish in this. And when you're playing someone like,
she's a fencing instructor.
Oh man, Die Another Day. Oh man. I don't think I can analyze it better than that. Die Another Day is such an oh man film. It's not good. I have a friend who listens to almost no pop music and he could not recognize Madonna, but he just said, look, I was aware that someone had come on screen and they could not act.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. I don't know whether it's partly that I really genuinely don't believe that her talent is acting. But I think it's also partly it's a very weird thing when you know somebody in a different context and then they do something else. And it's just like, oh, that really jars with me. Like Rupert Everett having that pop career, like Stephen Dennis having that pop career from Neighbours.
Yeah.
It's just weird. Some people can do it better than others, I think. And I honestly, I this has been kind of a bit controversial when I've said that David Bowie as well.
Oh man.
I know, I can't get with it.
Yeah. I can sort of see it. I know that there is a point where he comes on screen in The Last Temptation of Christ and Pontius Pilate, and you're first reaction is just, what the hell? Why is David Bowie Pontius Pilate? What's
He's great
going
in
on?
Zoolander.
He
However.
fantastic, yeah.
Mm.
I think Bowie has enough acting talent to get you through those moments, but I think one of the other things with Bowie is that as his career went on, he started to do more cameos and side roles, and I think
It's probably a better option.
Also probably practical in that it's hard to
busy
fit a
guy.
film shoot around a world tour. But Madonna hit this level of megastardom straight away, where it meant she couldn't be in the quirky side roles where she didn't have to, go through a great emotional journey or show some deep wound in her soul. She could just be fun. And that, I think, Desperately Seeking Susan proves, is what she's good at.
Yeah, trouble and fun.
Mm.
And when you get a film like W.E., was that late 90s, early 2000s?
It was later than that. It was early 2010s when she did W.E. That's a grueling film, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's hard to sit through, and not because, there's scenes of genocide, although, you do pray for something. But you are watching it and you're desperate for something to happen, and it's just a vacuum when she's on the screen. It's not great to watch at all. The sets are gorgeous. End of list.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the sets are gorgeous. Oscar Isaac is gorgeous, although, man, in terms of actors who really can pick him, there's one, isn't there? That he had great look. He had a great breakthrough with Drive. He had a great stroke of luck getting into the new Star Wars. Most of the rest of his career suggests that his agent is actually insane.
What else is he in?
What was that thing that he was in a while back where it was one of those multi-stranded dramas, which is always a bad start, I think. Something like Life Itself, and the killer line of it was life itself is the real unreliable narrator. And you think, what's that mean? Sit down and explain to me what you meant when you wrote that. Go on, explain to me how life is an unreliable narrator. I challenge you to do it. But yeah, there's some fun stuff here. Ex Machina's good. Inside Llewyn Davis is good. But
I found one. Sucker Punch. Holy Jesus.
When you just started intoning "oh" deeply, I thought you were paying homage to Adam Driver's cameo in Inside Llewyn Davis. But yes, Sucker Punch, fucking hell.
I know. He's been in loads of films. I've not even barely noticed him before.
I think he's one of those actors who is, I mean, for all I've ragged on his choices, he's incredibly versatile. It's very easy to watch him in about 7 different things without realizing that it's the same guy.
Yeah, he did 5 films in 2018.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's good in all of them, but how many of them are good themselves?
5 in 2019 as well. He's a busy guy.
He is a busy guy, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in 2014. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I mean that's a lot of films each year. Yeah, so yeah, 3 or 4 films each year on average. Maybe he just has that kind of face where it's not massively striking, and he can fit into many roles.
Well, I think one thing that I always notice it happening with is generally actors of a sort of Hispanic or Latin or Spanish background, because there is still this thing in Hollywood where they get cast as like the broadest possible variety of ethnicities. I mean,
yeah.
Alfred Molina was the first person I noticed this with. It's very hard to recognize Alfred Molina film by film, because in some of them he is white, in some of them he is Middle Eastern, in some of them he's South American,
Yeah, and who's the other guy? Who's the guy on Saturday Night Live who has that faculty as well. He can be Middle Eastern, Spanish. He was in the Sergio videos as the shaman guy.
I mean, you'd hope it would be most of them on Saturday Night Live who had that kind of versatility, but no, it isn't. You're quite right.
Oh, no. Okay. No. Who was he? Oh, my memory's shocking today. I do apologize. But yes, anyway.
But yeah, music-wise, we have to mention that this has one of Madonna's all-time bangers on the soundtrack.
Yeah, Into the Groove. That hits us at 1 hour in.
I mean, It keeps you waiting, but it's worth it.
It is. It's surprising that it was timed exactly in that way.
I think Into the Groove, I might be sort of getting this wrong because I was too young to properly remember this at the time, but it does seem like, looking back on people's reactions to Madonna, that in the very early stages, all of the kind of snobbier end of the critical faculty were like, oh, she's just a pop star. And it was around the time of Into the Groove that people thought, well, say what you want, but this is pretty good.
It's a great tune.
I might just be thinking that because Into the Groove is, as far as I'm aware, the only Madonna song to have been successfully covered by Sonic Youth.
As far as I'm aware, it is.
Good cover version, though. Very good.
I haven't heard the cover version.
Surprisingly good. But yeah, the song is great. Her whole 80s was just strength, wasn't it? You know, absolutely. Culminating in Like a Virgin. Absolutely great. Like a Prayer, sorry. Absolutely gold and stuff. Yeah. How do you feel about 90s Madonna?
Well, it just seemed so like corporate and polished and marketed to the nth degree. And she even produced the sex book.
One of the maddest things a celebrity has ever done, isn't it? I mean,
that's a crazy idea, but she's Madonna. She's just incredibly hardworking. She's headstrong, very on target, very hard work. You know, she just never stops. She's always reinventing. She's always trying new stuff. I love that fact about her, actually. She just isn't afraid. I mean, she was a children's author at one point. Do you remember that phase?
Oh, God, I hadn't thought about that for years, but I do remember that happening. Was it?
Yes.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes, I think Lourdes was only little.
Yeah. I like 90s Madonna very much. I think now that the sort of wreckage of the sex book and all of the like attendant controversies around the time, like her going on David Letterman and being as pervy and inappropriate on stage as David Letterman is generally is backstage, which was a big scandal at the time. Now that all that's cleared up, I think the 90s have quite a lot of her best songs. I think it's amazing that at the time she was being dismissed as just this controversy addict who just made shock music. She was actually putting out stuff like Secret and Human Nature, which are glorious songs.
Yeah, Human Nature is excellent. I haven't heard that since that time. She's just like this factory of amazing like tunes that keep coming out.
Yeah,
and so different from each other. Like you were saying, Dear Jessie, that's not like anything else.
Not at all, no.
And the Breathless album, that was unusual.
It was. That had songs by Stephen Sondheim, didn't it? Which, you know, let's see Debbie Gibson say that.
Yeah, it was kind of cheeky. And yes, what was the film that it's from?
Dick Tracy.
Dick Tracy, that's it. And she had to hang around with bloody Warren Beatty.
I know, she seemed to enjoy it at the time, but yeah, I also share your shudder. Yeah.
If anybody else could be in a sequel of what's the one where she is an author and there's an ice pick and did she do it and didn't she?
Basic Instinct.
Yes, thank you. You were talking about that earlier, were you?
I was talking about Basic Instinct 2 earlier, yes. Yeah.
That's it. If anybody could appear in a V-neck pullover in Basic Instinct 2, it could be Warren Beatty and be similarly.
Yes. I thought you were going to suggest Madonna for the sequel to Basic Instinct, but we have seen Madonna in an erotic thriller around that time, and it was not good. It was not good. Dripping candle wax on poor Willem Dafoe's balls.
Willem Dafoe, I remember that. Poor guy.
Of greater indignity than Lars von Trier has inflicted upon Willem Dafoe.
That guy. Ugh.
He goes through it for his art.
How do they? Yeah, exactly. Art. Oh, how do they get away with it? Honestly, these guys are maniacs. Just put Lars von Trier and the German guy up a fucking volcano. Sorry, I just sorry. Excuse-moi. Yeah, and get them to like improvise some shit up there.
I would love to know which executive was sat there thinking, all right, we've got Madonna in our hot new erotic thriller. We just need a hunk of a leading man for her to get involved with. I know. Really? You sure?
She's a funny old stick.
I would watch it if it was Madonna having an affair with Willem Dafoe's character from The Lighthouse. I think that would be a good movie.
Yeah, I still need to see that. I love the look of it.
I love that Willem Dafoe, you give him this part and any other actor would be like, okay, let's study a New York dialect from the early 1900s. What would this character sound like? And Willem Dafoe, serious actor Willem Dafoe, arguably, I think, the greatest living American actor, gets the script and says, oh, wow, a sea captain. Ha-ha, me hearties. And he just spends the whole film doing that Simpsons voice. And it's glorious. It's the best thing.
Oh, in that case, I'm definitely watching it for the comedy value. Well, I remember too, it was who can go from ethnic role to ethnic role, ethnic role. Fred Armisen.
Oh, Fred Armisen, of course. 'Cause there was a time when he was Saturday Night Live's go-to Barack Obama impersonator, and a lot of people were like, oh, is that appropriate? But it's like, well, Fred Armisen has like about 3% of every single ethnicity in his family tree somewhere. So they kind of got away with it. But yeah, it was very odd. Yeah. But yes, I think when we're passing the family tree of former Saturday Night Live stars, that is probably a sign that that's it for this week, isn't it? Right?
It's been an enjoyable jaunt. We've had a few meanderings here and there, but it's always fun.
Certainly have. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Don't forget, listeners, if you subscribe to our Patreon, you can get a monthly bonus episode as well as lots of other goodies. You can get our other movie podcast, Director's Lottery, and my Doctor Who reviews, if that interests you. But until next week with more Pop Screen, that's been your lot. I've been Graham.
And I've been Sarah.
See you next week.
Bye.